Alors, bonsoir tout le monde, bienvenue.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular public meeting of the Dieppe City Council on April 27th. And as a welcome and as an announcement, I'd like to take this opportunity, because it's the first chance we have, to congratulate the Dieppe Commandos for having won the Maritime League and to wish them all the best of luck at the Page Cup that will be held in Cornwall starting Wednesday of this week. I hope that we'll be able to receive them here at the end of their season. So the opening words, colleagues, please give me the serenity to accept the things that I can change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We do have quorum. Any conflicts of interest from councillors? If there are no conflicts of interest, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. It's been moved and seconded. Ready for the question? All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The agenda is adopted as presented. We're on item number 7, the presentations, inquiries, and petitions. We have the privilege of having the Superintendent Beauchet here this evening. If you have any questions for the RCMP, any inquiries, requests for information. Mr. Beauchet, do you have a message to give us? Yes, thank you. On April 15th, I had the pleasure of presenting my annual report for the Kodiak Regional Police Force. We received some favorable comments, and with your permission, we're looking at adapting a presentation to make here. We'd like to come back and make this presentation here at the Dieppe Council. If you're in agreement, I will prepare that and I will get back to you. Thank you. Yeah, please call Mr. Melanso and we will be glad to receive you during this point of presentations. Usually we receive presentations on the third Monday of a month. We'll have to see which month it will be in, either May or June, because after that, of course, we don't have information meetings. Oh yeah, and in May it'll be a Tuesday, as a matter of fact, because of the Victoria Day. Somebody's queen. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you and have a great evening. Now, under presentations, the financial statements. We do have representatives from Ernst & Young here. Mr. Vesterage, good evening. Good evening. Your Worship, councillors, I'm pleased to be here once again this evening to present the financial statements for the year 2014 to the City of Dieppe. You have the financial statements in front of you. We've also prepared a PowerPoint presentation to make it easier this evening, and I'd like to give you the highlights of the financial statements. You'll be able to follow it on the screen. First of all, I'm presenting the results of the work we have done this year. Just to remind you that we conducted the audit based on the Canadian audit standards. Our objective is to make sure that your financial statements are prepared according to Canadian standards in the public sector. We have done the work and we're pleased to be able to give you an opinion without reserve, and we're very satisfied with everything we have seen in the financial statements. I'd now like to go over the highlights of the financial statements for the City of Dieppe. But before I start going into the figures, I would just like to remind you that these financial statements were prepared according to the public sector standards. This is according to the requirements of the province. It's not the same presentation that you were used to getting at your monthly meetings all year long. You know, the province has a guide to help municipalities prepare their budgets. and this is to make it easier to follow the accounting, but we do have to present the financial statements according to the public service accounting standards. So because it's presented somewhat differently, the results might seem to be somewhat different as well. And these financial statements that you have in front of you are the consolidated financial statements of the city. So they include the figures from the city of Dieppe, as well as the general operating fund, the water and sewage fund that you're used to seeing, of course, but it also includes the activities included in the reserve fund, the capital fund and borrowing fund, as well as the industrial park. All of this is included in these consolidated financial statements. It also includes the activities of Expansion Dieppe and of Gestion 1604 Inc. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask them as we go along. Now, I'd just like to summarize the results here. You can see on the screen that there's two columns. There's 2014 and 2013. These are the actual figures. So if you look at 2014, we have total revenues of $64.5 million and expenses of $51.05 million to give a surplus, according to the public service standards, of $13,429,000. And this isn't necessarily cash that you have on hand, money that you can go out and spend. It's important to note that point. But this compares to the $12.4 million of 2013. And now we'll see what the kind of figures that you normally see internally when you look at your accounting figures. Now, based on the budget that you manage as managers, as municipal council, in the general operating fund, you have a surplus of $486,000 and a surplus in the water and sewage fund of $237,000. Now, by this, then we mean a total surplus of $723,000 for the operation of the city. And on the previous screen, we had seen a surplus of $13.429 million. So you can see that's quite a big difference here. And here we're talking about 723. So it's for a difference of $12.7 million. There were certain adjustments that have to be made to balance this. And here I will just give you an example of some of the adjustments that are made. For example, here you have a series of adjustments. These are amounts that are registered as revenues for the public sector, but not according to the internal municipal rules. For example, federal and provincial capital grants, it doesn't appear as revenue in your operating grant. It appears as a grant. It's the same thing for the contribution from developers here, which represents $3.4 million. Once again, that represents the streets that are built by the developers, and then they come back into the hands of the city. These are contributions, but they don't really affect your operating budget. So there's a total of $7.6 million for these different adjustments, and they're included as revenue for the public service accounting standards, but not in your operating budgets for your own management purposes. Another category of adjustment are for the amounts that are included as expenses according to municipal rules, but are not recognized as expenses for the public sector. For example, the number one here is of $6.6 million. These are capital expenses that are paid from your operating fund, both in your general operating fund and your water and sewage. So you've paid out $6.6 million. It's included as expenses for your internal purposes, but in terms of the public sector accounting, it's seen as a long-term investment. Here you also see the reimbursement of the long-term debt. You reimbursed almost $5.9 million. Now, this is the principal of your debentures. So this, for the public sector accounting, this is a reimbursement of a debt. It's not an expense, but yourselves, in your operating budget, it's considered an expense. And so we have to adjust for that. And there's also transfers to and from the reserve fund. The reserve funds, well, when we say it's just going from one pocket to another, the reserve funds, they belong to the municipalities, so they don't appear under the public sector accounting standards. And there's a last category. On the preceding screen, we saw that your capital expenses in the operating budget was not considered an expense for the public sector accounting standards, but it is an expense. What is an expense is the depreciation of your assets, the depreciation of your buildings, the equipment, the streets. That's considered an expense. So certain things are considered expenses and other things are not. What also comes into your consolidated statements are, well, there was a $712,000 surplus from expansion Dieppe. That's included in the consolidated statements. And another major element is $966,000. This is when you have a deficit or a surplus that is included then in the following year's budget. And so this is good for internal management purposes, but not for public sector accounting standards. So in short, we had $723,000 difference but the surplus in the operating budget and the water and sewage fund, that's what we had seen that you use internally, but we end up with the adjustments are summarized here, that when we just saw the different expenses, the different adjustments here for a total of $13.4 million. Now this is what you see in your financial statements. You see that there's $13,429,000. That's found on page 2 of the financial statements, and it's just what I just explained to you here in the PowerPoint. If you have any questions so far, any questions from councillors? If not, let me go on. Well, of course, the first question would be, no, we didn't receive the financial statements per se. But, or if not even the draft. But you do have the draft, no? No? Oh, yes. Yes, it came in an email. Yes. Yes, thank you. Now, I'm going to go over the next screens very quickly. Of course, the municipality always prepares balanced budgets. Oh, Madame Dallaire has a question? Yes. Now, according to the former previous council, we have 620,000 surplus. What was the surplus in 2013? Just to understand the difference. I know this comes back every 2 years. No, I don't have the figures here with me. But could you send us those figures after the meeting? Yes, of course. Stefan, Mr. Treasurer? Yes, for the 723,000, we have 225 for general operating fund, 166 for water, and 68 for sewage. Thank you. Thousands, of course. So for a total of about 400,000 in 2013. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on. The budget has to be balanced. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Here you're seeing some statistics on the ratio for the general operating. You see the interest and capital on the debt, the ratio, and the part of your budget it represents, and you see it over the last 10 years. So in 2014, you saw that the ratio was 15.62% of your budget. So the trend is downward since 2007. That's when it had reached the highest point, and so it's been trending downward since. In terms of capital investment, year-over-year comparison, here you see in 2014, for water and sewage and general operating, we're talking about a total investment of $17.5 million, approximately. And you see that it varies from year to year. In 2006, of course, that was the year of the construction of City Hall, and there were other major projects as well. So the 17,000 is probably around the average of the last few years. In terms of the debt load, by the end of 2014, if you would look at the debentures that are due for 2014, there's $86 million. 2013, it was 92, and in almost 94 million the year before. And to explain that, then we see that over 3 years, here you see in 2014 we had started the year with 92,000. There were no new debts, but I think you did go and get some debentures in early 2015. But there hadn't been any debentures issued in 2014. But there were reimbursements of capital at $5.8 million to give a total of 86 million. And you see this for the last 3 years. Here, you'll see the reserve fund that you manage. And just to give you an idea of the situation of your reserve fund, you see the last 2 years here, 2014 and 2013, and at the end of 2014 you had $5.8 million in reserve. It's almost exactly the same as in 2013, $5.8 million. So your reserve fund hasn't changed very much, in spite of the fact that there were transactions during the year. There was money coming in, money going out, but you ended up in the same situation overall. And you also see the distribution according to the different types of reserve fund: general operating, water and sewage, real property, and so on, and capital investment. Here you see the statistics you're familiar with, I'm sure. You can see that in this column here, you'll see the total budget for the general operating fund only for each one of these last 10 years. There were $21 million in 2005 and up to $48 million in 2015 is what's being forecast, which is an increase of 3.3% compared to the 2014 budget. And that's compared with the tax base of the municipality, $2.7 billion. But this tax base had gone up by 4.5%. So the taxable value, the total budget is going up a little slower than the tax base. So if you look at the different years here on the screen, you'll see that these are the smallest increases this year. That I don't have the figures for the years before 2005 with me here, but it's certainly the smallest increases in these last 10 years. And here you just see a comparison of the tax rate from 2005 to 2015. So the tax rate and the annual increase, we're not planning an increase for 2015, but over the last 10, 11 years, there's only been 2 increases, I believe, as we can see on the screen. So that wraps up my presentation, and I'm open to any questions you may have. Questions from councillors? If not, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your explanations. Thank you. And thank you for continuing to explain the relationship between the operating budget and PSAP. Thank you. And we are number 8, questions by members of the public. If not, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 13th. It's been moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Dallaire. Ready for the question? All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. So the minutes of the regular council meeting of April 13th are carried. Number 10, for motions, memorandums, and nominations. Administration 10.1.1, new policy, A37, sponsorship requests. Mr. Melanson. Thank you, Your Worship. The first one is a new policy, A37, to guide us in all the sponsorship requests received by the municipality. Last week, we became familiar with the new strategy document, and all of this was explained at that meeting last week. And if there's no new questions since last Monday's meeting, it'll be carried this evening. Who would like to read the resolution? Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council accepts the new policy A-37 entitled Sponsorship Requests, and I so move it, Your Worship. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question, Mr. Bellevaux.
Thank you, Your Worship. On our page 16 for sponsorships, 3 brackets 1, to finalize an agreement, verbally or written. What is the question? How could we have a verbal sponsorship? That's a good question. Mr. Book. Or Mrs. Duguay, I'm sorry. In fact, it should be a written agreement and not a verbal agreement. Only written. Thank you. So we have to change the document before last reading. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried with a small change before reading. Next item, 10.2, proposed amendment, procedural bylaw following amendments by the Supreme Court of Canada 2 weeks ago concerning the prayer at the municipal council meetings, so we must adjust to this decision. So the council will read a word of welcoming. So this is to change that. For the resolution, thank you, Your Worship, that the Dieppe Municipal Council accept to proceed with the first and second readings of Bylaw A4, brackets 2015, entitled Procedural Bylaw of the Municipal Council of the City of Dieppe. I so move. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Cormier. For the question, thank you, Your Worship. I was wondering why it was recommended that we should have a word of welcoming rather than a moment of silence. Was there a particular reason for one rather than the other? No, not really. I think it was a question of custom with the prayer that was a serenity prayer before, but now we will call it the opening word for the meeting. Personally, I would rather have a moment of silence. So for those people who would like to pray silently could do so. And other people could do something else during that time. It would respect the wishes of everybody. I would rather have that rather than a word of welcoming. Councillor Godet. I agree that we keep this that we face up to this challenge to not change what we can and change those other things that we can. But I would rather that we had kept a certain nobility of spirit, if we could call it that, rather than give us all the wisdom so that we could think like the First Nations used to speak of the Great Spirit. Perhaps we could mention the Great Spirit or a Supreme Spirit rather than wisdom. We're not that wise, but we do our best. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Béliveau. I can understand with my colleague, Councillor Godet. We don't want to mention necessarily something that we would hold dear to our hearts. The Supreme Court is supreme, and I think the changes that we've made are appropriate, and we should recognize that we should make good decisions. And I agree also with Councillor Delard that it's up to each one of us here to have a moment to ask ourselves if we're going to do the right thing tonight and represent everybody's interests. So I shall support this resolution that we should say this prayer out loud. Thank you. If there are no other comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. No. Councillor Delard. The resolution is carried as presented. 10.1.3. Mr. Melanson. As you know, the new health center, the breast health center at Dr. Georges Dumont University Hospital Center is looking for artworks to decorate the new spaces, and a Dieppe artist has created a work of art, and we've been asked to buy it. The councillor is asked to take a decision on this, and the funds will be taken from the operating budget. This is to confirm the acquisition which has been done. My colleague, Mr. Thibodeau, was at the official opening of the Oncology Center and says it's a wonderful painting. For the resolution, Councillor Cormier. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council approved a donation of a painting which would be displayed at the new Breast Health Center integrated to the Dr. Léon Richard Oncology Center at the Dr. Georges Dumont University Hospital Center, and that the cost of the painting from artist Gilles Haché in the amount of $700 be funded from account number 1-2-20-28-2310. Grants to organizations, donations, general operating budget. I so move. Moved by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Leblanc for the question. All those in Councillor Thibodeau. I think we should amend this resolution and mention breast health center and not breast cancer health center. If you wish and you want to support the motion, that's effectively the title. Proposed, moved by Councillor Thibodeau and seconded by Councillor Dallaire. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The amendment is accepted. Now for the motion that has been accepted, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The resolution is adopted as amended. Next item is 10.2. The next two are linked. Policy L13 is a partnership proposed in this policy that certain sections be deleted. And the second one is for requests for donations that we received during the year. So this is to establish parameters for future and for recommendations. So the next points are explained. If there are no other questions, we'll proceed to the reading of the resolution. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council accepts to repeal Policy L13 2002 and accept the new Policy L13 2015 entitled Partnership with the Not-for-Profit Sector. I so move. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Dallaire. For the question, Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking to see where I can find this, but I think it's in reference with the nature of the activity. At 10.2.1, I think there's a reference to runs. That was, I wanted a clarification on that. I had the same reaction, but when you read it, I think it might be the commas and the periods that are not in the right place. It's this. It's run, walk, or bike. For once, I looked in the dictionary and there's nothing for COURS to run. So I think it should be a course, a run. If anybody else would like to check it, I'm referring to the title of the program. Mr. Book, is this a program or a run? Yes, it's a run. I'll correct this typo. I think we'll have to change the sentence. Something's not working out here. If you look at the definition of a run, or walking, or biking, or skating, roller blades, well, it does these words, these verbs don't make much sense now. I think commas are important, but make the right corrections. Mr. Combe, you have an opinion or a question? On page 46, C, we should make a correction that it should be submitted and rather than must be submitted. We must be clear. Any other questions, corrections, comments? If not, for the question, all those in favor of the new policy signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The resolution is adopted and we'll make the corrections. Thank you, Councillor Béliveau. Next item It's the new policy L20. I've summarized this already, Your Worship. So for the reading, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council accept the new policy L20 entitled Donation Requests. I so move. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Delao. For the question? No question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. L20 is adopted. 10.2.3. This is an installation of rubber surface for playgrounds. So we're looking at the Parc Amos, GF Bourgeois, and Rita McNeil Park, accessible park. So we've had an offer from Playtech Enterprises Inc. for the amount of $92,731.93 plus taxes. So now we want to proceed with this work. For the reading, Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council award the contract for the installation of a rubber surface on 3 municipal playgrounds to Playtech Enterprises Inc. at the total cost of $92,731.93 plus HST, and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from account number 127083005 Public Lands General Operating Budget. I so move. Moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Gaudette. For the question? You have a right to ask a question. Councillor Béliveau first. I wanted to know if there was only one proposal. Yes, we only had one proposal for this. Councillor Delao. When I look at the memo, the financial considerations, it states which budget is it coming from, but it doesn't mention if it was planned for this year. But now we're saying yes. But for the public, can we state the advantages of this rubber surface rather than a gravel surface? Yes, it's a question of maintenance. When we have the fine gravel, if there's a broken bottle or something else happens, vandalism or whatever, you have to replace a very large section to ensure the secure safety for the children, and as well to ensure that this maintenance would be done in the winter. So this is cleaner, more accessible for people in wheelchairs. It's easier. A lot of our parks are done this way now, and this year we're recommending that the work be done on these three. Thank you, Councillor Gaudette. I recognize the merits of what has just been explained, respecting safety, the debris that can fall and break. But as we add surfaces, synthetic or non-natural surfaces, children have no longer natural elements on which to play or participate, whether they're running, walking, or riding their bikes. It's not a natural element. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to determine that it was the Parc Ama Bourgeois and the Rita McNeil Park. Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments for the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Carried as presented. With respect to finances, the resolution for the adoption of financial statements, the council adopt the financial statements of the city of Dieppe for the fiscal year ending on December 31st, 2014, as presented by the firm Ernst & Young. I so move. Moved by Councillor Cormier. Seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. For the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The resolution is adopted as presented. And financial statements. Are we going to have a resolution for the mayor to sign them, or is that automatic? Automatic, thank you. 10.4, engineering. Tender award, sidewalk installation for sidewalks, presented by City Hall. Amiro Street, Cana Drive, and Dieppe Boulevard will have sections that will be installed in 2015. So we're looking for construction of 141,816 by Maritime Road Recycling Inc. And we have received a few proposals in this process, 3 for this. So this is for recommendation of approval this evening. For the reading of the resolution, Councillor Béliveau. The council award the contract for the project entitled 2015 Sidewalk Installation, Amiro Street, Canaan Drive, and Dieppe Boulevard to the lowest bidder, being Maritime Road Recycling Inc., at the cost of $141,816 plus HST, and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from account number 3335587609, Sidewalks, Various Streets, General Capital Budget. I so move. Moved by Councillor Béliveau, seconded by Councillor Dallaire on the question. Councillor Gaudette. The name of the company seems new to me. Did somebody change their name? It's a company that we've worked with in the past. They're from Grand Falls. They haven't been in the region before? Yes, regularly. So you have experience with their work? Yes. Thank you. Any other question? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The resolution is adopted as presented. 10.4.2. This is another tender award, reconstruction of streets, Centrale, Pascal, Dysart, and Adelaire, Savoie streets. To lowest bidder, McDonald Paving and Construction Limited, at a cost of $2,099,888. We received 4 proposals, and this one was recommended to council this evening. For the reading of the resolution, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. That council award the contract for the project entitled Street Reconstruction, Centrale, Pascal, Dysart, and Adelaire, Savoie, to the lowest bidder, being McDonald Paving and Construction Limited, at the cost of $2,099,888.50 plus HST, and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from account number 3335587601, Asphalt and Related Work Management, General Capital Budget. I so move. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Cormier. For the question, Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. I think here we see the reconstruction of different streets, but in the budget, we had mentioned Fox Creek Road as well, but that will come later in another tender award? Yes, it'll be another one later. Yes. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. My question is with the estimate of the engineers and the explications saying that there was a difference between the estimate of the highest and the lowest bidders, which was dealing with the asphalt or cement. These estimates, do they take into account of the costs of the previous year, or those that are listed for this project is for 2015? So the information, is it from last year or for the current year? Mr. Leblanc, the cost estimates you see in your documents, that was prepared a few weeks before the tender award, so it's been updated for this year. So I think my second question is that 68%, or the total would be $400 estimated at this year, then we have to accept the proposal. The 23% of difference, it's a lot. It's a trend we've seen for awards for asphalt because the cost has increased. We don't have any other explanation. It's a process of a tender award. In this case, the contractors raised their prices over what we had foreseen. Does that really reflect the cost of asphalt and cement? There should be a cost on the market. Do they change their prices from one week to the other? I don't know their business plans. Yes, we go in the market, we ask for prices, and the proposals are opened after they had been sealed. We had 4 offers, and they were above the estimate that we had for this work, unfortunately. That's the reality. We're happy when they're lower, but sometimes it's a bit higher, which is the case this time. There's nothing much we can do. That's the price for the job. Either the engineer who gives us the estimates do work to make sure that the estimates are closer than what were offered as costs. To respect the budgets, we had to reduce the volume of work that we wanted to do it for the second contract in a few weeks. So we tried to respect our budget. That's the bad side of the coin. Is there sections of road that we had wanted to do that we won't be able to now because of this increase? Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Gaudette, I have 2 questions. Firstly, do we have an individual price for the 4 elements? Do we have a cost for Centrale, Pascal, Dysart, and Adila Savoie separately? I don't have them with me tonight. We did calculate that, though. They told me that Pascal would be micro resurfacing, essentially. No, these streets in this contract are going to have the same type of work. We're going to take off the asphalt and then put in another coat of asphalt. Microsurfacing will be with another contract. On Centrale, if all you're doing on this sanction of Centrale, it's not ideal. So I'm wondering if this is the best solution. Will it last a while? Some parts we will remove the asphalt. It's the same as we've done in previous years, so we're correcting things in certain areas before we put on a final coat. So you're going to replace the base in certain areas. Yes, some areas. Yes, because some places need it. At Adelaide-Savoie and Aviation, at that intersection, can I presume that you were going to have a rotary in that area? We did the tender award, and Adelaide-Savoie is a private road, so we're waiting to have discussions with the airport on the works. So on the private street on Adelaide-Savoie, if the airport is ready to reimburse us, we would do it, but they don't have the intention to asphalt that section. So we're not going to do that part. So there's not going to be a new intersection there. No, it's going to stay the way it is now. Okay, maybe for the next time. Thank you. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question of logistics. Since we're going to have work done on the march this year, do we have anything to say on the timing or the schedule for the works? I think it would be useful to not do Central and Pascal at the same time, because these can be alternate routes. So can we organize that so that we don't do the work on these both of these streets at the same time? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau, for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The resolution is adopted as presented.
10.5. Mr. Melanson? Yes, the council agreed to the participatory budget, and so the committee came to make a presentation last Monday, as a matter of fact, but this resolution is just asking for an amount of $300,000 to help the participatory committee do its work. So we're asking for an authorization for $300,000. Who would like to read the resolution? Councillor Dallaire. That council resolves the sum of $300,000 be earmarked to the 216 general operating budget for the implementation of community-selected projects as part of the participatory budget initiative. And I so move it. It's been moved and seconded. Ready for the question? Councillor Godet. I would have preferred that this amount be the equivalent of 1% of our operating budget. It would be a little more, quite a bit more, than the amount being proposed here. But I think that general wisdom amongst our citizens is fairly deep to allow them to allow us to offer them that extra discretion. I think there's no risk really of increasing the budget, because the budget is already set and it falls within the amount that we are planning for the fall. Furthermore, amongst the choices here, and I looked at the choices that were made in Dieppe and elsewhere, a number of projects that we really would like to see in the neighborhoods are projects that should be taken on by the municipality anyhow. So whether they're done in one way or another, or in one program or another, the new costs are not as high as the amount that is given to the choice of the citizens. So in the city of Dieppe, I think we could easily honor our citizens, those who are going through this exercise, and allow them the discretionary spending over 1% of our operating budget, and that would add a lot of value to the participation of the members and the whole participatory budget process. That would be worthwhile. Thank you. Thank you for your opinion. Councillor Dallaire. Thank you. I would like clarification, because at the end of the resolution, we have a whole list of criteria. When we vote for the budget, are we voting on this whole list of criteria, or are we going to have a chance to speak out on these criteria at some other point? Because it seems to me that several of them are contradictory, and others I would just like more information on. Is this going to come back to us? Yes, Your Worship, Councillor. This is for your consideration, but it will be adopted at a later date. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Béliveau. Yes, to follow in the same line. This handbook, I guess, it's going to be translated as well? Yes, thank you. On the resolution, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It's carried as presented. Appointment of auditors for the 2015 fiscal year. Councillor Cormier. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council appoints Ernst & Young as auditors of the City of Dieppe for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2015. And I so move. It's been moved by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Godet on the question. Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. I note that in our correspondence, the last time we asked for tenders, we put out a bid, was in 1999. And understand me correctly, I'm not questioning the professional services offered by this firm, but are we doing it, well, it's not on a regular basis because it was been 16 years already, but are we planning on going out for tender at some time in the near future? Well, we can discuss it internally, Your Worship, and we can come back to Council with our thoughts on this. You're raising an excellent point, Mr. Béliveau. I think that would be a good idea to do this periodically, to ask for submissions, to ask for bids, as do other regional commissions. Sometimes some of them were able to save a lot of money. So maybe it's something that we should look at periodically, maybe every 5 years or 8 years or whatever frequency we choose. I think it would be a good idea, a good practice. It's just a suggestion for management. Yes, and because it could lead to savings, and I know that other firms have to use the same tools and they have to meet the same standards, the same accounting standards, but sometimes it allows us to see a different perspective on the same issues. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. If there are no further questions, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It's carried as presented. For the appointment of auditors, we're now moving on to the municipal bylaws, 11.1. It's bylaw 75-5 on the water and sewage systems. It's first reading? No, it's reading in its entirety. It's been posted, and so now we have to read it by titles. Thank you. Who would like to read it? Mr. Councillor Blanc, thank you. Bylaw number 78-5, 10-2015. A bylaw and amendment of bylaw number 78-5 of the Municipality of Dieppe respecting the water and sewage systems. 1. Article 1, entitled Definitions, amended by deleting the definition Director of Public Works and substituting it with the following definition. 2. Article 34 is repealed and replaced with the following. And I so move for second reading in its entirety. As for reading in its entirety, moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Dallaire. On the question, Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to come back to the question of why we would allow to go beyond the maximum limits set out. It's in Appendix C. It should read DBO. It's not exactly the same thing on the preceding page. That's BODs. There's a difference in the terms used. But on page 126, when you look at all of the list of substances with concentrations that have limits, and then in Appendix C, there are extra surcharges when we go beyond the concentrations set in the maximum limit. First of all, why do we accept that they go beyond the maximum limits, and what are these surcharges? Because I haven't seen these figures yet. And it should be in the bylaw if we want to be able to apply them. And somebody asked me that question. Thank you. Councillor Thériault? Mr. Thériault? Mr. Bourque, rather. I'm sorry. Mr. Bourque. The issue of costs and extra costs, I asked for it, but I did not receive that information. So I don't know exactly what the surcharge will be. But I need to get that from the Commission. So we cannot move on to third reading this evening. So I would suggest we table third reading, the bylaw at this point, Your Worship. And I'm asking the question once again, why do we agree to go beyond the maximum limits? Why set a maximum? We might as well say there is no limit, that it's unlimited. Now, unless I have a very, very comprehensive answer, a complete answer to this, that I will not be able to support this bylaw, Your Worship. Thank you. Councillor Leblanc. Or Mr. Leblanc, rather. Well, the way the bylaw is written, we have maximums that are set out for BOD and TSS. These are the parameters where we do allow to go beyond the maximum. It depends on the industry, for example. I don't want to name any specific businesses, but there are certain businesses that don't bother the discharge and the sewerage, and it's okay to let them go beyond the maximum as long as the excess is controlled. In other words, there are so many other substances. The surrounding businesses, for example, have discharges that are so much lower that the total amount is still very, very diluted overall. And this is one way of allowing an industry that, because of the nature of the business itself, of its processes, it's something that would be acceptable, environmentally speaking, but we do still want to be able to control it, and control the discharges. And so we're saying that it would be acceptable, but there are extra costs involved. And so there's no costs included in the bylaw, but it has to be done on the administrative side. If somebody wants to discharge 320, somebody else wants to discharge 1,500, well, the amount will be higher. It's impossible to set a price list in advance because it has to be determined on a case-by-case basis. The intention this evening is just to express the will and to say we're not closing the door to different kinds of industries, to any kind of industry, but we'll have to deal with you individually on a case-by-case basis. So when it does happen, when all of this comes to the plant, well, I mean, they might not even notice it because it might be one client who's going to discharge a little more than the others, but it's 1 out of 1,000 or out of 3,000, and so it does not represent a great quantity overall. Now, there are some substances that you absolutely do not want in the sewerage, but certain substances such as BODs and TSS, well, the Riverview plant is there to remove those kind of suspended solids, for example, or biochemical oxygen demand substances. So for many of these substances, they are able to remove it and process it to a level that is completely acceptable. So, for some of these people, it's just going over the limit, the maximum individual limit, but not terribly. And this is done from the perspective of the Sewerage Commission that asks the city to control this kind of discharges, because of course they can't control it at the plant level. It has to be controlled at the discharge level. Well, I'd like to come back to and ask what kind of measures we're going to implement to make sure that there are inspections carried out and that we just don't leave it up to the industries to determine what they're going to discharge. I mean, this is not something in which people use a lot of virtue quite often. So I'd like to know how we're going to be able to monitor this. Do we have a list of the companies that do discharge certain substances at times? And are we going to be able to go out and take samples and measure them and analyze them and determine how often they go beyond the limits, and how do we control them? Well, to answer your question, we do know the businesses and the industries that do have these higher risk discharges, if you will, the ones who are at risk of going beyond that, the maximum limit set out, the 300 to 350. And all of the measures are there in the bylaw in order to allow us to set up equipment to take regular samples in order to monitor it, in order to keep our eye out. We do have experience. There are some areas where we have had problems in the past because some people go beyond the limits, but this bylaw will give us the tools to act. Now, we have to make the effort, of course, with the cooperation of the Sewerage Commission. We have, with the goodwill and with staff time, of course, we will get there, probably better than we are doing today with the tools that we're going to develop here. Thank you. So we're talking about internal measures here for the fines and the surcharges. Yes, very few of our clients are going to be affected by this. Our present clients, present and future, because when industries are thinking of setting up shop here, they ask us, well, what are the limits? It's part of their economic analysis before somebody comes and set up shop. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Thibodeau, thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering, too. I read the whole document and the appendixes, and I was wondering, how is the citizen going to be informed of all this? Because we're looking at this now, but the ordinary citizen, I'm not sure that he's going to go read the bylaws to see what can be discharged in the sewers and what cannot. So, if possible, like in the past, we had lists of substances that have to go in the blue bag or the green bag. I think that perhaps we should do the same thing here. We should publish these schedules and send them out to the homes to make sure people are aware of this, because I'm sure that Mr. and Mrs. Citizen are not going to read all of this. Well, no, the good news is that Mr. and Mrs. Everybody doesn't have to worry about this unless, unless they do their oil change for the snowblower but throw it down the kitchen sink. I mean, which most people won't do. So I don't think it affects most people. Now, there's the whole list of other substances that most people can't even pronounce. Well, I think most people will probably think, oh, is this something I should throw down the drain? Well, probably not. I mean, twice a year we do have hazardous waste collection sites. If you can't wait until you can bring it to the landfill site, the recycle New-Brunswick site. But I agree that we do have to advertising. We have to advertise a little more. It's because there are certain things that the processing plant that they cannot remove from the water. So we do need to make sure that these things are not dumped into the sewage system. There are certain things like oil changes, leftover gasoline. Sometimes Public Works will get a call from people because there's a smell. The firefighters have to get involved. Quite often, things are sent down the drains, and they shouldn't be. So yes, there's a certain amount of education that needs to be done, and at the same time, we do want to encourage whistleblowers. I mean, if you see your neighbor emptying a gas can down the drain, well, he shouldn't be doing it, and down the garage drain, because it can cause serious problems in your plumbing and in the house if that's where you're throwing it away. But it can cause problems for the whole neighborhood. For example, we're going to amend this bylaw, and the fines are going to be updated. They're going to be a little higher. So at least the city will have the tools to go get the ones who are negligent. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions, comments? If not, we'll then vote on it. All those in favor of the bylaw as read will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. No. Councillor Béliveau. We're now going to read it for a... if I understood correctly, Mr. Bourque was still short. Was missing some information, but we're still ready to go to third reading. Well, what I understood is that it's going to be done internally. It's not going to be found in the bylaw itself. And the issue of fines, if I understood correctly, it's going to be done by regulation, by the commission. Well, if the municipality receives a request for somebody to go beyond the maximums as set in Schedule A and D, or comes out under Schedule C or D, well, at that time, the city will be in contact with the Sewerage Commission, and there would be some surcharges that would be set. But so there won't be a list for this substance it's this much, and for that substance it's that much. Okay. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. Okay. We're now going to read this bylaw for a third time by title only. Councillor Leblanc. Bylaw number 78-5, brackets 10-2015. A bylaw and amendment of the bylaw number 78-5 of the Municipality of Dieppe respecting the water and sewerage systems. And I so move it for third reading by title only. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Leblanc and by Councillor Dallaire on the question. If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Then No by Councillor Béliveau. Thank you. 11.2, Bylaw A-4, 2015, Procedural Bylaw of the Municipal Council of the City of Dieppe for first reading by title only. Councillor Béliveau. Your Worship, it's bylaw number A-4 in brackets 2015, a procedural bylaw of the Municipal Council of the City of Dieppe, and I move its first reading by title only. First reading by title only. It's been moved by Councillor Béliveau, seconded by Councillor Cormier. On the question, Councillor Dallaire. Thank you. I asked the question earlier to see if people were in support of a moment of silence rather than a word of in opening. So it seems that there was no appetite for this, but it doesn't prevent you from having your moment of reflection. Yes, but I'm going to vote against because of that. Thank you. So if there are no further questions, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. No by Councillor Dallaire. It's carried then. And in first reading of title only. And for the second resolution for second reading only by title, Councillor Béliveau, bylaw number A-4, 2015, a procedural bylaw of the Municipal Council of the City of Dieppe for second reading by title only. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Béliveau, seconded by Councillor Cormier. On the question, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. No by Councillor Dallaire. So its bylaw is read for a second time by title only. And we're now on number 12, notice of motion. If not, we're on to number 13, inquiries and announcement by members of council.
On va débuter à ma...
We shall start on my right with Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. I have no announcement for this evening. Councillor Dallaire. Same thing. I have nothing this evening. Councillor Godet. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the junior hockey team, the Commandos. They showed that they were an elite team by their discipline and the quality of their game. I saw a few games, parts of games, and one in its entirety, so I think we should be proud of the quality of the administration and the game. I would like to speak a bit about asphalt on Amiro Street from Beaubassin to the church. Everybody is noticing the big plaques that are removed. So I think there was an error in the composition of the materials when it was fabricated, when it was made. The mixture was wrong. I think it should have been a thicker coat and more adhesive when it was installed. So I think the inspection is poorly done when we have these projects. I hope that engineering will do better work so that we don't make useless expenses and to impose upon our citizens to drive into holes, which is unnecessary. And I also like to mention that someone that I would like to congratulate that filled a lot of holes on Amiro. And rather than fill the big holes, they just filled the part where which we go past after the hole. It saves asphalt, but also it saves the banging of the wheel when you go through the hole. So I'd like to congratulate those people who filled this part that goes up from the hole so that we don't have to bang into it. And I'd like to ask the director of engineering if he knows of a new asphalt formula which seems to come from Australia. It's not bituminous, but more cement. And it's a formula that arrived in Canada. And the composition is flexible, but it does not absorb water. So we have a lot of water in our climate, but it seems that this new formula is less affected by water and thawing and freezing. Have you heard about that? Yes, I heard about that. And I'm meeting the representative of that company this week, in fact, to know more about it. So it's been a few weeks ago that I read about this formula, and I'm very curious to see if everything, all the good we say about it is right. And I'd like to ask the municipal director about Fox Creek Road, about the lines. Did you receive my email? Yes, we're going to do the follow-up with engineering services. I thought we had all agreed that we should put lines for pedestrians. And the other thing is that if we're going to do too much work too fast, maybe it's not necessary to put the lines in, but please take care of that. Yes, thank you. Councillor Comier. Thank you, Your Worship. I have an announcement at 9 o'clock Thursday morning. There's a breakfast for people of a certain age at the Rotary Pavilion, followed by a conference. And I would also like to congratulate the students of the grade 3 at Amiro School for their artworks that I had a chance to see this year. And I would like to congratulate the teachers and the artist that created these works is very young, and it's very interesting to see these works. Councillor Thibodeau. I know that this time of year we have a lot of potholes, and they're everywhere in the city, but I noticed that near the airport, up to the limits of the city, they're huge and deep. And I think they should be fixed as soon as possible before cars are being damaged. And especially on the road coming into the city in west direction. On the east side, it's not bad, but the other side, there's a lot of damage. The other thing, I would like to encourage the citizens who are listening to us and the members of council to participate in the consultations of Radio-Canada this Wednesday at 6:30 at Théâtre L'Escaouette. I think with all the critics we've received from Acadians, I think a lot of people should participate and give their comments. Councillor Thibodeau. I have nothing to add. Thank you, Councillor Béliveau. So have a great evening, everyone. And for the members of council, we still have a few items to discuss in private. Thank you.